If you're keen to find out as to what's going to happen to the planet in the next 40 years, this discussion is for you. Joining me is Professor Randers from the Norwegian Business School. Prof, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Prof, you co-authored the book, The Limits to Growth. Tell us about that.
The Limits to Growth was written in 1972. It looked at the global future from 1970 to the year 2100, so it looked at the next 130 years, and it described various possible futures, different scenarios for world developments, some of which were sad, where problems arose in this century, and others were pretty positive, where things went rather well in this century. The book concluded that it's very difficult at the time to say exactly which of those futures would become a reality, but it said that in general the world is very small. In general, growth in population and economy cannot or could not continue for another 100 years without running into planetary constraints. And it also said that it's likely that human decision making will be very slow, so that one would allow the global society to expand beyond the sustainable carrying capacity of the global system.
And interestingly, my sense of that book is that really the world is quite a small, Earth is a small planet with very finite resources. Would you say that's an accurate assessment of the book?
This is an accurate assessment of the book. It, however, also made the point that it's not only the resource base that is limited, the capacity of the system to absorb pollution is limited, we have limited social adaptability, we're not able to change very quickly, there are other limitations to growth, basically, and that's the reason why the book was called Limits to Growth. There are various different types of limits.
And interestingly, you've just launched another book, 2052, 40 years from here. Yes. The sense of that, what really is the book about?
So the important difference between this book and the Limits to Growth is that at this time, I think we know enough to make a forecast. Not perhaps for 130 years, but for 40 years. We know enough about how big or small the planet is, how fast or slow the economy is growing, the population is growing, how much resources there are, what is the ability of the ecosystems to handle our effluent and the biodiversity destruction. And consequently, it is now possible to make a forecast about what will actually happen, as opposed to making a set of scenarios. This is one future.
Right. Now, also, from the book itself, you're playing different scenarios based on different scholars. So you're not actually the only person that's penning out an opinion. Tell us about the scholars that you've engaged to come up with an opinion of some sort.
So basically what I've done, I've tried to describe what will happen over the next 40 years, which is basically a world which will grow much more slowly than most people think. There will be fewer people in 40 years than most people think. The world economy will grow much more slowly over the next 40 years than most people think. That means that I don't think there will be a resource crisis during this period. However, the slowdown in the expansion is slow. It will slow down so late in the day that we will trigger a climate crisis in the process, because the emissions from even that smaller future world population and economy will lead to an increasing temperature. And so it's basically a sad scenario. What my co-authors have tried to do, or helped me doing, is to make this picture much richer. I know a lot about some things, but they have added in coloration basically to the scheme. This is a 400 pages thick book. It describes very many aspects about future society, and I've had great help, from philosophers and psychologists and, nuclear scientists and the whole schmear, trying to describe different aspects of the future.
Right. Now, do you think that we're doing enough? Is humanity doing enough to save the planet, or to counter the possibilities that we're faced with?
No, And that's the clear message of the book. You know, we will be doing quite a bit over the next 40 years. We will continue to increase our energy efficiency. We will be moving out of fossil fuels and into renewables. We will reduce fertility rates. You know, we will be doing a lot of stuff, but we will not do enough to avoid a climate crisis. In other words, we will not be cutting greenhouse gas emissions fast enough to avoid a significant temperature increase.
Professor Randers, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.